A nun slept in a chicken coop, not because she had to, because she had given her bed to a patient. And when that patient left, she gave the bed to the next one, and the next, and the next, until the chicken coop was the only place left for her. In the United States, we have a word for people like this. We call them saints. But in Salvador, Brazil, they had a different name for her. They called her the Good Angel of Bahia. She walked the streets before dawn in a brown habit, carrying sick people no one else would touch, entering alleys no one else would enter, caring for people every hospital had turned away. For decades, the city of Salvador knew what she was, but it took the Vatican, with its medical commissions, its theologians, its years of investigation, to confirm what an entire city already believed. What happened after that chicken coop cannot be explained by medicine. It cannot be explained by sociology. It cannot be explained by any framework science currently has. This is the story of Sister Dulce, the first saint born in Brazil, and the miracle the church itself said had no natural explanation. Maria Rita de Sousa Brito Lopes Pontes was born in Salvador, Brazil, in 1914, into a prosperous and deeply Catholic family. Her father was a dentist. The house was comfortable. The future was set. But from childhood, Maria Rita saw the world differently. At 6 years old, she was already bringing poor children from the streets into her home, feeding them, caring for them, preparing them for their first communion. Her mother died when she was 7. The grief did not close her. It opened her further. At 10 years old, she and an aunt would buy food at the local markets and distribute it through the poorest alleys and hillside neighborhoods of the city. 10 years old, while other children played, she was walking the most forgotten streets of Salvador, carrying food to people no one else saw. At 18, she sat down with her father and told him the decision she had made. She wanted to become a nun. Her father wept. He was a deeply devout Catholic, but he saw in his daughter a brilliant young woman with every advantage in life. He wept for a long time, but he accepted it because he knew her heart better than anyone, and he knew there was no stopping her. In 1933, at 18 years old, Maria Rita became Sister Dulce, a spiritual daughter of Saint Francis of Assisi, in the congregation of the Missionary Sisters of the Immaculate Conception, and she went directly to the streets. At that time, Salvador had two worlds: the world of established families, beautiful churches, Sunday masses, and the world of the back alleys, the sick without families, the abandoned, those who had traveled from the countryside looking for medical help and found nothing, who were dying on sidewalks, who were being eaten alive by insects while still breathing. Sister Dulce chose the second world. She gathered the sick from the streets, those with open wounds, those who could no longer walk, those who had been abandoned by their own families. She took them wherever she could find space. First it was a corridor in the convent, then an abandoned warehouse, then a space under a staircase. The city's mayor called her in. He told her she could not keep placing sick people in public spaces, that there were rules, that there were limits. Sister Dulce listened carefully and responded with a simple question: "Then where would you like me to put them?" The mayor had no answer. She went back and kept going. One afternoon, the situation reached a breaking point. There was no more space. The sick kept coming, from the countryside, from the streets, from hospitals that had turned them away. And Sister Dulce had nowhere left to take them. That was when she looked at the convent's chicken coop. It was a small space, dirty, smelling of hay and animals. It was not a place for human beings, but it had a roof, it had walls, and it was better than the street. Sister Dulce asked for permission. She moved the chickens, she cleaned the space as best she could, and she began receiving patients inside. 40 patients in a chicken coop. And at night, when there was no space left for anyone else, she chose the floor of the chicken coop to sleep. There were no beds available. She had given every bed away. She had given her blanket away. She had given everything she had. She was the superior of a convent. She was the daughter of a prosperous family. And she slept on hay because she had given everything else away. Those who found out were stunned. Those who did not, which was most people, went on with their normal lives while this woman slept on the floor surrounded by patients no one else wanted. The chicken coop was just the beginning. Because when word spread, when Salvador found out what was happening inside those walls, something in the city shifted. Donations began to arrive. Volunteers appeared. Doctors offered their time, and the chicken coop became a hospital. For decades, Sister Dulce was the most constant presence in the most forgotten places of Salvador. She took in men being eaten alive by insects, women who arrived in conditions that made even doctors look away, children who had been abandoned with infections so advanced that hospitals sent them home because there was nothing left to do. Sister Dulce received them all. There was no hour to sleep. There was no hour to rest. She herself described it this way: "Those who live in this work do not live their own lives. They live the lives of others. Their problems are our problems." There was a method to what looked like madness. It was not only compassion, it was a deep conviction that in every sick person was the image of God, that touching an abandoned wounded man was touching Christ, that there was no separation between serving the poor and serving the sacred. The doctors who worked alongside her said the same thing over and over. There was something in that woman that could not be explained, a calm that was not human, an energy with no visible source. She did not sleep and was awake. She did not eat and worked. She did not rest and kept going. Salvador began calling her the Good Angel of Bahia while she was still alive. It was not a term of affection, it was a statement of fact. In 1949, Sister Dulce was forced to stop. Severe pulmonary tuberculosis required complete rest. The doctors were direct. The right lung was compromised. There was serious risk to her life. Immediate treatment and prolonged rest were necessary. Sister Dulce obeyed. Partially, she received treatment, she recovered, and she went back. But her lungs never fully healed. For decades, she worked with reduced respiratory capacity. Every physical effort was harder for her than for anyone else, and she kept going. Over time, the social works of Sister Dulce grew in ways that could not be explained by human logic alone. Without guaranteed funding, without solid institutional structure, depending almost entirely on donations and the faith of those who work there. Today, the social works of Sister Dulce is one of the largest health and social assistance complexes in Brazil. With a hospital, schools, a rehabilitation center, a home for the elderly, serving hundreds of thousands of people every year. It all started in a chicken coop. Sister Dulce died on March 13, 1992, at 77 years old, with lungs that had never fully worked since the tuberculosis, with a body marked by decades of work without rest. Salvador stopped. 50,000 people followed the funeral procession through the streets of the city, not because anyone organized it, because the people came. And that was when the process began. For the church to declare someone a saint, an extraordinary life is not enough. A miracle is required, a verifiable event, investigated, documented, with no natural explanation. The miracle presented for the beatification of Sister Dulce was this. A Brazilian child was diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors were clear with the family. There was no known medical solution. The prognosis was death or permanent irreversible disability. The family prayed. They asked for Sister Dulce's intercession, and what happened next was documented by the very doctors who had given the diagnosis. The child was healed, not gradually improved, not unexpectedly responsive to treatment, healed in a way that the doctors, upon reviewing the tests, could not fit into any known biological process. The case was sent to the Vatican. The Congregation for the Causes of Saints appointed an independent medical commission, international specialists with no connection to Brazil and no involvement in the beatification process. Their role was purely scientific, to evaluate whether a natural explanation existed for what had happened. The commission concluded that it did not. On October 22, 2011, Pope Benedict XVI beatified Sister Dulce in Rome. But the process was not finished. For canonization, for the final declaration of sainthood, a second miracle was required, also verified, also investigated, also without natural explanation. The second miracle was accepted, and on October 13, 2019, Pope Francis canonized Sister Dulce in St. Peter's Square before hundreds of thousands of faithful. The woman who had slept on the floor of a chicken coop to give her bed to a sick person was declared a saint by the Catholic Church. The first saint born in Brazil. There is a phrase Sister Dulce said that stayed with everyone who heard it. She said that those who live in this work do not live their own lives. They live the lives of others, that their problems are our problems, that their illness is our illness. It was not a beautiful phrase for a speech. It was a precise description of what she did every single day. There was a boy who arrived at the social works at 16 years old. Violent, disturbed, unable to control his rage. He threw chairs. He attacked anyone who came close. The staff was afraid of him. Sister Dulce approached him. The boy cursed her with every name he knew. She did not step back. She told him, "You are my son and I love you." When he finished speaking, he began to cry, and she stayed with him until he was calm. That boy came back years later. He was well. He had a life. That is the pattern that repeats in every story that came out of that chicken coop, that hospital, those works. Science does not explain the formal miracles recognized by the Vatican, but it also does not fully explain that woman. What drove her? Where the energy came from to keep going when everything pointed toward exhaustion? How she could sleep on the floor of a chicken coop with the same peace another person might feel in a comfortable bed. There are things that reason alone cannot contain, and Salvador knew that long before the Vatican confirmed it. Sister Dulce did not ask to be recognized. She never gave interviews to become famous. She never sought political support for her works. She never used her story to raise funds in a calculated way. She simply did it, every day for decades, without stopping. And what remained, the hospital, the schools, the rehabilitation centers, the hundreds of thousands of lives touched, is not the legacy of a strategy. It is the result of a faith that knew no boundary between the sacred and the human. The chicken coop where she slept still lives in the memories of those who knew her. And what happened after that chicken coop, the miracle, the beatification, the canonization, is the Church's answer to something the city of Salvador already knew for decades, that there was something in that woman that was not only human. This has been another episode of Sacred Roots. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who also seeks to understand the moments where faith and life intersect in ways that reason alone cannot fully explain. Subscribe to the channel. In the next episode, we continue this journey through the most fascinating mysteries of the sacred world. See you soon.